Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Newsgram. Let's begin the process of creating a new you. If you're willing to entertain the idea of making a new life for yourself, then today's show just might do the trick. It was the late, great Dr. Seuss who once said, "The more that you read, the more things you will know. The more that you learn, the more places you'll go." The reading will come later, but the learning part begins right now, because I want to introduce you to Paul W. Naragon, another man who's no stranger to the rhyme. Something else we're going to get to shortly. Paul once asked himself the question, "Who am I?" And he did it over and over again as he took a very long walk.
I walked from Kansas City to the West Coast when I was 50 years old. And that kind of started that whole contemplation of thinking, who am I, what's the purpose of life, and what am I doing, and all this kind of stuff.
You heard him correctly. He walked from Kansas City to the West Coast.
And I did it in the wintertime, too, and I just had a pair of Teva sandals and cotton socks, because you can imagine the heat generated when you walk 15 to 20 miles a day.
Now, the heat wasn't the first thing that came to mind, but it's all that time alone that I was worried about. Again, it was Dr. Seuss who said, "All alone, whether you like it or not, alone is something you'll be quite a lot." So I guess if walking is what you're determined to do, then you gather your thoughts and the things that you need, and you set off to walking. Godspeed. Indeed. So Paul took a long walk, and he came back with some profound wisdom that he now shares in a series of books.
I've written 3 books now. The first one was Gibberrishi's Profound Rhymes. The second one, Gibberrishi's Rhymes to Contemplate. And the third one, While the Gibberishi Rhymes, His Bed Burns. All these focus on basically the same context, and what it does is try to give a very practical application to spiritual ideas about life.
And some of that wisdom includes things like this.
We need to understand that our actions are based on our thoughts, and if they're not for the well-being of all, and they're only serving a few, that's not being of service to yourself or anyone else, really.
I love that. Your attention and intentions determine the flow of your body's life force. Also, part of controlling your thoughts is quieting that inner voice of yours, the one that's constantly chattering away.
When you stop the daily chatter that goes on in your head, what you begin to start to realize is that the reason why we are experiencing what we're experiencing is because we're living most of our life based on memory. And so what I've come to realize from that is that a lot of the things that we think we're experiencing, we've already lived through, and it's only because we are stuck on our memory of the past that we think that's what's happening to us. So we're living in the past.
Paul has created a series of books to teach spirituality in a fun and easy-to-remember way because they're designed on the principles of parsimony.
Yes, exactly. And most rhymes and poetry is really very short in verse. And one of the things that's very important, and this is another thing that brought me to this whole idea of writing poetry and rhymes, is that I remembered when I was in graduate school, I had read an article about Occam's razor. It's the law of parsimony, which says basically something that is explained in its simplest terms and yet explains fully what is being said is the best way. So I always liked the idea of poetry because I was using Occam's razor to explain an idea. And when it rhymes like that, it just all fit together for me in that way. So I use both the idea of rhythm and rhyme and also parsimony.
Here's an example. It's one of Paul's poems called Into Imagination Peaking. What carries the life force to change attention? Only you. You're the only source I can mention. Even for the truth realized, you may not care. You select what you're aware. You're both teacher and student. You establish what you undergo, forego, or prevent. It's all in the eyes of the beholder. Forget about another looking over your shoulder. You're not imitator, but a grand creator. That will be recognized sooner or later. The seeker, the sought. All else is for naught. For the seeker is invisible to the seeking. Into imagination you are peeking. There's no other concession, nothing else worthy of confession.
People need to realize that they are the most important person in their life, and how they feel about themselves and the world is what they are showing everybody else by the way they act. So the better people feel about themselves, the more they love themselves, the more they will radiate that energy to themselves and the world, and that will help change them and the world. And they'll be the example to show other people.
Refocus your energy and establish a new perspective, one that serves the well-being of all. A different perspective creates a different you. Sounds like a pretty good idea, because after all, if you want to change the world, you have to start with you.
One of the Sadhgurus, the perfect masters in India, Ramana Maharshi, once said, attention is what our life is. So whatever we give attention to, and if it's the programming that we give attention to, then the programming is running us. We think we're running the program, but it's really running us. That's really basically what I've learned about life.
I think Paul has really hit on something here. He took a very long walk to gain a new perspective on life, and he's sharing it with you. The book is called Gibberrishi's Rhymes to Contemplate, Poetic Verse, Moving You into a New Life, by Paul W. Naragon. And it's online right now at xlibris.com or amazon.com and all the usual places. And, of course, we did add links to the show's description for you. Why not explore some of these concepts written in rhyme? Their soothing, rhythmic style just might open up your mind. And that's it for this edition of Newsgram from webtalkradio.com.